I guess if you were making a plan to convince Trinis to really get vaccinated, you couldn't really come up with a better one than this. It seems like the weeks of anticipation and waiting for vaccines to arrive has allowed some Trinis to get rid of some of their vaccine hesitancy, because the COVID vaccination drives that have been happening around the country within the last few days have seen a lot of people come out. Many people seem like they're ready to get vaccinated now, and they want to get vaccinated. I don't think anyone had it as a plan and plotted out the way that this would happen like this, but it seems like the delay that Trinidad had in getting these vaccines allowed a lot of people to start to miss the vaccines, you don't miss the water until the well run dry. Possibly, if Trinidad, in usual fashion, if we had lead out ahead of the Caribbean and had all the vaccines there waiting, everyone would have had an opportunity to really take their time and wonder about, should I have this vaccine, and think up about all the possible reasons why they shouldn't have. But when a country like ours went through what we did, and we're seeing that these COVID figures are skyrocketing, and then we're seeing that there aren't any vaccines available, and when there aren't any vaccines available, you start to wonder, what are the options in controlling this virus? Okay, we cannot lock down forever, so there must be some way for us to get out of this spike period in the pandemic. And the way out, the only way out that everyone keeps saying, is vaccination. So I think after a while, Trinis got the picture. They started to understand that it was this or stay locked down, and we cannot stay locked down. COVID-weary Trinis take the vaccine. The Eastern Regional Health Authority has seen a doubling in the number of people for the COVID-19 vaccine. Speaking during Monday's Ministry of Health press briefing, Chief Executive Officer of the ERHA, Ronald Soifat, said on an average of 433 people were being vaccinated per day at their centers. He said prior, the figure was less than half of that. Listen, I don't too like all of the overdone generalizations, but they say Trini like to wait till last minute, and I think some of this vaccine rush we're getting right now is some of that. Some Trinis had all the arguments waiting, but the fact that we had to wait, they had the arguments waiting, but when you're forced to wait, and I was considering this for a bit, all while I was speaking about the vaccine hesitancy in Trinidad and throughout the Caribbean, as we see in some of the other islands, I was wondering about this in Trinidad. A lot of the people who were speaking about vaccine hesitancy in Trinidad and worried about who is going to take control of them through whatever injection, they didn't even have the opportunity to take the vaccine. We have been short for vaccines for all the time that there have been vaccines. So all the people who were worried that I'm not taking this vaccine and you can't catch me taking this vaccine, and well, you didn't even have the vaccine to take. And now that the opportunity arises and we see that the vaccines are available, Trinis are recognizing that this is the way out and we're going to take this way out. Soifat said the AstraZeneca and Sinopharm first doses had been administered at the Sangre Grande Enhanced Health Center, Toco Health Center, and the Mayaro and Rio Claro health facility. But the ERHA drive, as effective as it was, possibly the most effective drive that we had in the country, was the one held at the Diwali Nagar facility, where we had the TTMA, which is the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, hosting a vaccination drive. 4,416 vaccines administered in one day. The country's first public-private mass vaccination drive has exceeded expectations, with 2,697 employees in the manufacturing sector being vaccinated yesterday. And I think this would be one of the main keys in pushing the vaccination drive in our country and ensuring that it reaches much further, much faster. What was done here is a partnership where the government provided a certain amount of vaccines for the manufacturing association, and then they brought in their own employees to be vaccinated. And what that did is the operation was named and it was coined as vaccinate and operate, after something that the Prime Minister said. And what that does is it changes the whole discussion on vaccines. The discussion on vaccines for someone now isn't just about me doing my own research and wondering if I should and see what people say online and different. This is, my job told me I am going to go to this location and get this vaccine. Do I want to refuse what my job asked me to do? And okay, there may be some questions about freedom and whether a job should be allowed to make you take it, but technically they didn't make you take it, they're just strongly suggesting it. And because of the present scenario we find ourselves in, you understand that if you do not take this strong suggestion and get the vaccination, chances are you may not be able to get back to work. So the vaccinate and operate drive seems to be even more effective than all the rest, the public-private partnership. While Health Minister Terence Dialsing estimated that 2,500 citizens a day could be serviced at the Diwali Nagar in Chaguanas, 197 more were able to benefit from yesterday's event, which was a partnership between the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and the TNT Manufacturers Association. Dialsing also praised the TTMA for organizing the initiative at short notice, as he claimed that it had come up with useful ideas for making the vaccination drive more efficient while maintaining safety. I must say that they did not only take the template, but they actually improved on it. They learned from us and we are now going to learn from them, Dialsing said. And he wasn't the only one that had admiration and words of praise for the way in which the TTMA carried out that vaccination drive. Most people who were there, and I even passed there and saw what was going on a bit, if you actually went in and saw the process, they really had the process down to a fine science. And most people who went in, their first-hand account of how it went was smoothly and quickly. And I think that's where the private comes in. The private sector is able to run some of these things much smoother than the public sector could. Unfortunately, because of how the public sector works, inefficiency is their specialty. And when it comes to things like a vaccination drive, you really do not want inefficiency right there and then. That's not the point where inefficiency would do its best job. At the moment in our vaccination drives, we're currently using the Sinopharm vaccines and the AstraZeneca vaccines. And it seems like nearly all of our vaccines so far have been donated. The ones that we are purchasing and the ones that we have been told would be purchased would be 800,000 Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And this creates one of the other difficulties within this pandemic and within the vaccination drives that we're seeing. The fact that there are so many different vaccines. The fact that there are so many different vaccines provides a benefit because now the world is able to better cover the areas that may not have gotten the vaccine if it was only one vaccine trying to reach out across the entire world. So we have some variety, so the vaccination drives could spread out at a faster rate. But these multiple vaccines now create the problem of choice. Choice is a problem sometimes, and especially when it comes to something as crucial as your healthcare, sometimes choosing something like a vaccine may not be the best idea. Because now, as we have these different options, people have the ability to go online, to go wherever they choose to, and do their research and see that there are differences. There obviously would be differences between these vaccines. If they're different vaccines, of course, there will be some amount of differences between them. And especially considering now that the vast majority of our vaccines, at least what we can see as potentially being our vaccines in the future, are going to be the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, the questions that are raised with that would be asked also. 6 things to know about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What is the J&J vaccine? We're not going through that one. What is in the J&J vaccine? You can go through that one yourself. Has use of this vaccine been suspended? Yes, it has been suspended, but then it was brought back in. The questions that are more pertinent, at least for what I'm going to go through, are what are the health risks? Johnson & Johnson has included safety information regarding a small number of reports of adverse events following use of the vaccine, including rare events of thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome. I am very grateful for my strong rudimentary knowledge in syllabalization. Yes, WHO has noted in a May 19th report that this incident is very rare, with only 28 reports of TTS out of over 8 million vaccinations in the US. And as with all the vaccines that are currently on the market, WHO emphasized that the benefits outweigh the risks. Who shouldn't take the J&J COVID-19 vaccine? According to the according to the safety information provided by the company, the people who shouldn't take it are the people who would be allergic to it. And every time I see that instruction on all medication, I wonder, like, it's like a suggestion on a water bottle. Do not breathe in this water if you are not made to breathe in this water. It's pretty obvious. If you're allergic to something and you take it, it's not going to do well to you. So individuals with a known history of severe allergic reaction, and that's about the main limit on who can take it. What about the side effects? The company has listed some possible side effects similar to those of other COVID-19 vaccines, including injection site pain, headache, fatigue, myalgia, nausea, fever, injection site erythema, and injection site swelling. In clinical studies, severe allergic reactions, including anaphylaxis, have been reported following the administration of Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. The company has advised anyone with the following symptoms to contact their health provider: shortness of breath, chest pain, leg swelling, persistent abdominal pain, severe and persistent headaches or blurred vision or bruising, etc., etc., etc. The usual bit that you hear sped read to you at the end of nearly every single drug commercial. The usual. And that's kind of how I see a lot of this worry with some of these pharmaceuticals. One of the things that is being pointed out is that the alternatives aren't any better. The alternatives we have to vaccinating and operating is locking down. And I don't think anyone out there is wishing for any more lockdowns. Many people are wishing that the ones that are currently in place can stop with immediate effect, so the vaccinations begin to get more tempting. And we're seeing through that, especially in the last few days, when we're seeing how effective our vaccination drives can be. And when you look throughout the Caribbean, we're seeing some hopeful signs. We're seeing signs that seem to suggest that the end isn't that far out of our reach. 85% of tourism workers could return to work by year end in Jamaica, they're saying. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says there's a possibility that by end of this year, about 85% of tourism workers will be back on the job if the sector continues to gradually rebound. And by year end, he's hoping for 85%. But he said that they're already at 80%. In the airport, they're at 80%. And in many of the other tourism sectors, they're already at 80% of the people who were let off are already back on the job. And that's great news because a lot of the Caribbean, including Jamaica, depend for a large part on tourism. So the more workers that get back into the industry is a signal that the industry is on the way back up again and that the economies are on the way back up again. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett has claimed that local players in the entertainment sector have earned some 0.5 billion for the provision of services to hotels over the first 5 months of this year. For reference, that is around 3.3 million US dollars or around 22 thereabouts million TT dollars. So the entertainers over in Jamaica are having quite a field day in these first 5 months. And quite possibly we may be seeing a lineup for a very expansive opening, especially when we're looking into the tourism sector. And the tourism sector is our specialty in the Caribbean. And when we're looking into the tourism sector, a lot of what affects it is the freedom of movement. So as Trinidad is speaking about reopening their borders, Jamaica has about 80% of their tourism sector back up and running. Even Barbados is seeing some major strides now towards an exit plan to the present situation they are in. Barbados continues to make major strides in its COVID-19 fight, with its positivity rate falling to 0.5% in recent days. But Minister of Health and Wellness Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostick said authorities are concerned that school children are not following protocols when they leave the premises of their respective institutions. Because Barbados has some in-person schools going on, the worry is about the protocols being followed by the school children. But as an entirety, Barbados is seeing that their numbers are decreasing and that they're seeing a move in a positive direction. And with all of this as the backdrop, the Antiguan Prime Minister has a very interesting suggestion. The Antigua Prime Minister suggests Antigua PM calls for tax cuts in airline ticket prices in the region. Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown says the coronavirus pandemic has provided Caribbean governments with the opportunity to implement tax cuts for airline tickets across the region. Now is the time for us to cut taxes even by 50%. And I do accept that you may not be able to determine the elasticity of pricing on travel demand because naturally regional and intra-regional remain relatively low during this period of COVID. But the fact that you are now collecting or you hardly collecting anything at this time, it is not revenue you are giving away. You can't give away what you are not earning, said Brown, who intends to use his chairmanship of the Regional Integration Movement, CARICOM, next month to push for the initiative. And I agree with Prime Minister Brown. Listen, me and this Prime Minister Gaston Brown may be able to get along pretty well, because he is the same one that is giving away the land and the KFC, well, the potential KFC, and the money over in Antigua. And I already ready to move to Antigua, and this suggestion that they reduce the airfare taxes, what that would do is free up the travel within the islands. And I think that is a great idea, because a lot of the for example, one of the reasons that was given that Tobago had this spike in COVID numbers was because Trinidad, during the Easter season, we provided Tobago's tourism industry for them, and maybe on a more sensible level, and especially when people are vaccinated. If the Caribbean can open up to the Caribbean at a cheaper level, maybe this could be our opportunity to move into the more integrated life that everyone in the Caribbean and all the CARICOM members so often speak about and so often wail about and moan about and hope about. Well, this may be just that opportunity to allow the Caribbean region to figuratively get smaller for other Caribbean members. Because really and truly, I am sure if there are cheaper ticket prices, especially considering that many people would be coming out from months of being stuck at home, if there are cheaper ticket prices being offered for our neighboring islands, I assure you many of the people who usually vacation from within the Caribbean would stay within the Caribbean and vacation. And that would allow some of the restarting economic power that we're having, some of the stimulus that we'd surely put into the markets, to remain inside of the Caribbean, and we all return benefits to ourselves from it. That's a good idea, and I'd like to see where it reaches. And almost surely that idea would be tagged on to whether someone is vaccinated or not. St. Kitts Nevis wants only vaccinated visitors, and that's understandable. They won't be the only island. The government of St. Kitts Nevis has introduced one of the strictest travel protocols due to COVID-19. According to St. Kitts Tourism Authority, only vaccinated travelers will be welcomed based on a new policy which requires tourists, including those from the United States, to be vaccinated with either a 2-dose vaccine like the Pfizer or BioNTech, Moderna or AstraZeneca shots, or a single-dose vaccine such as Johnson & Johnson shot. And that's another point to add to the entirety of this. I hope that as we move out from the pandemic situations and from the lockdown situations, and we're seeing the borders open and the people who want to fly can fly, that we don't end up with a situation where, because of that some people do not find themselves into some difficulty with some country they're attempting to enter, where the country is demanding or where the country would like to see this specific shot and they have that specific shot. And then in such a case, does this person now have to get double vaccinated with another one of the more recognized shots? And when you think about it in that direction, you understand very well why the government is remaining with the standard that they are only accepting vaccines that are approved by the WHO, because you're hoping that any vaccine that has been approved by the WHO would be approved by just about any country. When we're getting further into this new normal in the reopening, well, almost surely we're going to see a lot of demands for vaccination and proof of vaccinations. Do you think that the demands for proof of vaccinations would just be completely fair and understandable and a reasonable request, especially when considering what the world would have just come out of? Or do you think that the demands for proof of vaccination is heading down a scary road where we see that the authorities that be are expanding their authority to hold on to different sectors of your life and control what you do in different sections of your life? Tell me in the comments, what do you think? And don't forget to share the video with those that may like this content and like the video also. And I'll see you in the next one.
When you wake up in the morning and you hear the birds cry and you feel the music rising with the tide.